items, none known of. Brings us then to the first item of business today, which is the Port of Auckland update. And we welcome Roger and Andrew once again to the front desk. Their presentation today, intriguingly entitled The Rail Challenge. So it's with a degree of interest. We'll see what that challenge is with the rail down at the ports. Welcome, Roger.
Good morning, everybody. Lovely to see you all again, and Happy New Year. It's lovely to see you all. What Andrew and I have come today to do is to talk you through some of the challenges we're facing in achieving your letter of expectation percentages for cargo moving on rail, and explain to you some of the things that we plan to do and some of the direct impacts and some of the things that we may ask you to consider going forward. All right, let's see how we go with this. There we go. Whoops, go back. So, as you know, the port sits down at the base of the CBD, and we do have a significant rail infrastructure. As I've talked to many of you about, we represent about a quarter of all of New Zealand's containers coming in and out, around 850,000 and growing, and we are largely an import port. What I would say is that the majority of the cargo currently moves from container terminal to the rail. The rail is along Quay Street, and you can see the bend in Quay Street at the base, I think just along here. So you can see we've got the rail siding there, and that links then into the Kiwi Rail network. We've got 4 rail sidings which link to the main trunk line. We currently run about 3 trains a day, though that has reduced because of lack of demand. And we've got the capacity to move about 120,000 20-foot equivalent units a year. Right now, we've worked with Kiwi Rail, and we can increase that with limited investment to 170,000 if the demand exists. In your last letter of expectation, you outlined to us that you requested we achieve a target of 16% of container volume either departing or arriving in the port by rail. Currently, we're achieving about 10.6% over the last calendar year, and that has declined year on year, and I expect that it will continue to decline. And I'll take you through that reason for that in a second. Currently, the port subsidises rail at $7.7 million a year. Now, what I will say to you is port management and the board will no longer continue to make that subsidy, and over the following years we will start to charge at the total cost to serve, and I'll talk you through our strategy on that. You have an option that if you wished in a transparent way to subsidise rail to achieve your carbon reduction goals, to potentially allocate funds directly for that subsidy. But that is a choice that you should make. So one of the reasons, what I've tried to use, and this is indicative costing, I just don't want to get into the detail too much, but I can if you really want to. But the reality is road is more flexible and cheaper. And we do not make the decision on what cargo goes on rail. That is the decision of the cargo owner. They decide which mode of transport to either deliver to the port or to take the product away from the port. And right now, road is significantly cheaper and will be a point-to-point delivery versus rail, which leaves the port, goes to our inland depot at Wiri. Then it has to be picked up by a truck and delivered to the warehouse. So it's a 2-step versus a point-to-point delivery, and the point-to-point delivery is cheaper. That gets you into the position why cargo owners are not choosing to elect rail. It's just a matter of economics. So this is where we spend the money. Right now we are spending about 2.2 million moving the cargo from the container terminal and loading the trains. We currently pay $4.9 million a year costs to KiwiRail to run those 3 trains, which we don't recover. And because if we tried to recover it, we would be completely uncompetitive with road. And lastly, we pay a significant rent on the rail siding we have in Wiri. That effectively represents about $88 a 20-foot equivalent that ratepayers are subsidising to importers and exporters currently. As a result, management has decided we will no longer have that subsidy, and we will start to phase out over the next 3 to 5 years that. So what we've done is we've introduced from the 1st of January a $20 rail handling charge, and progressively we will increase that to $90 to cover the costs of running the rail. What we will also do, though, is over the next 3 to 5 years increase road access charges to the port. We are targeting to line price with Port of Botany, as I've spoken to you about previously. So that would mean that a road access charge of $200 if you arrive in the peak and $120 in off-peak. And we plan to announce that to the sector progressively within the next few months. And we'll give them a timeline of how long it will take to take that price up. What we are going to do is we will always leave rail cheaper than the off-peak as an attempt to try and encourage people to mode shift. So we've got 2 objectives with that pricing. One is to move road to back of clock hours, and I've talked to you at length about that previously, where we would see trucks going in and out at night. Now, there will be some issues with the community, which I encourage you to listen to and take account, but don't restrict the supply chain of the country with noise limitations at night, because that's a real problem for us. And secondly, we will, as we say, keep rail cheaper whilst recovering the costs we incur. So if you do have a choice, over the next 3 to 5 years, I should have said this, we will under-recover between $12 and $15 million maintaining the rail. If I was being totally commercial, which I'm not because you've got aspirations, I would close the rail operations tomorrow. And we would save a lot of money. What I'd say to you, though, is if you choose to want rail to be more competitive, then we will sit with you and discuss whether or not you wish to make a direct subsidy in a transparent way and allocate it as part of your budget. I think us non-transparently subsidising rail needs to end, and we need to, as a community, understand what is the cost of rail and how we should do it. And lastly, what I would say is there is a side knock-on. Every box that you put onto rail has an advantage, and you've seen that from Peter Reedy's letter that he also shared with you around congestion and carbon reduction. But you do drop our revenue because we won't get the booking fee from the beginning, and the delta is about, there's a couple of $1 million a year. So you will directly impact your profitability of the business you own by transferring more product to rail than road. So that concludes our presentation, and we're happy to take any questions that you might have. We will continue to provide the rail service, so please, I'm not turning it off, albeit because I'm not playing totally commercial, but I am, we will close the gap on this cost base. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Roger, for a very succinct and revealing presentation there. We'll open up the questions. Councillor Darby.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Roger. Andrew. You'd be aware of the correspondence we've received from KiwiRail, and there's suggestion there in that correspondence that some of these costs have arrived at our doorstep due to earlier decisions not you or Andrew have made, but a previous board has made, and that is to take rail further away from, I think, the ships. Instead of being able to land more directly, you've got secondary movements, they add cost. Can you, in the first instance, comment on the KiwiRail response to, I think they're seeing your presentation today, and they are suggesting that these costs are there because of Port of Auckland company decisions?
Yep, I can. So a couple of points, if I can, on the key rail submission. Peter's right. In the 1930s, they pulled up the rails on the wharves and they put the 4 sidings along and expanded into Quay Street. So, I think a decision that was made maybe 70 years ago is a little stiff to be stitching me up with now, but that's just my view on that. The second thing I'd say is, through back of the clock operations and time of use charges, we hope to achieve much of the congestion saving that Peter talks about being achieved in rail. I think it's $50-something on his estimates. There is additionally his $54 on carbon reduction, which is achieved by rail, but certainly the congestion saving could be achieved by us continuing to push more truck operations into off-peak.
You're suggesting that these infrastructure decisions, that the withdrawal of some of the rail infrastructure on the port were 70 years ago. I'm aware that there were much more recent decisions, like in the last 10, 15 years, where rail infrastructure was substantially changed. So just quizzing you there, Roger, are you saying that the rail infrastructure costs grew because of decisions of 70 years ago? I think Mr. Reedy is referring to more recent decisions of your predecessors, your more recent predecessors, not the ones that are long dead.
Yeah, well, you have the benefit of history that I don't, is the best way I can answer that. What I'd say to you is the 4 rail sidings that are sitting along where they are today have been there for a very long time. So what other decisions were made in regards to the removal in the 70s of the rail spur that went into the container terminal, I think is maybe what you're referring to, on Ferguson North. I can't argue why that was done. My understanding is it was done to further enhance the capacity of the port's container operations predominantly. So we are not in a position to move now the rail back, even if we could, because of the volume that we're putting through the port right now in containers.
And what about the question of, previously you've said, well, you've got to consider the destination of those boxes, because you could create an efficiency at the port and possibly, and you can maybe correct me if I'm wrong here, an inefficiency once they get to an inland port or a rail siding, and you're creating multiple movements in another part of Auckland in trying to avoid port to box to truck in, say, the central city area. Can you just comment on that? I'd like to get my thinking around that, please.
Yep. What I'd say is, first off, the commercials of rail, that rail is really cost effective in excess of 200 to 250 kilometres. So to move let's say we were to move 170,000 containers from here to Wiri, where the majority of them go, or from Wiri they would be hubbed out to the airport precinct, which is now the largest logistics precinct in the city, you'd see increased congestion in the Wiri zone and on the roads to the airport precinct along the back. So that whole Partanui Drive and all that area, you'd see significant increases in traffic congestion. So you'd move the traffic congestion off the Strand or significantly reduce it, and you'd re-put it into Partanui, into the airport precinct and into Wiri.
Last one, because I know there's others that want to ask questions here. So what is the solution to that? Because do we need more rail sidings? Do we need the big freight movers, I don't know, the main freights and whoever? They are investing in a lot of rail side infrastructure. Do we need a more strategic outlook and to ensure that there are more sidings so that trains can actually offload in multiple locations rather than, the limited number that we've got now, to reduce the very thing that you've just described in Auckland South or wherever?
Well, the Auckland Airport Precinct doesn't have rail, so we'd need to construct rail to the Auckland. Foodstuffs have built the largest distribution centre based primarily on road transport. What I'd also say is I think the solution right now, the lowest capital solution without a national decision, is to move to off-peak running. There's plenty of, I mean, you jump in a truck and leave the port at 3 in the morning, you're in Wiri in 20 minutes. You do it at 9 o'clock in the morning, it's an hour and a half. So for me, that's the simplest solution in the short term. Now, if you have carbon objectives that you want to increase rail, I respect that, then you'd need to have to, as part of the integrated transport plan, be starting to look in partnership with KiwiRail where to build more sidings, where to build more spur lines. And that's a major capital expenditure I don't know if you can afford. That's up for you to decide.
Councillor Walker?
Sure. Just around the rail versus truck circumstance, is there work being done on foresighting, forecasting out the changes that are occurring in respect of the move to electric trucks, which I understand are cheaper to run? They don't generate any noise. They can handle hills easily. And they're particularly suited to, well, shorter runs, and the runs we're talking about are largely shorter runs. So is that something that Port and KiwiRail are factoring in? And this change is happening fairly rapidly.
No is the answer. And the reason it's not my responsibility to tell transport companies what mode to use, what I would say is we are working with the national road carriers on whether or not we establish charging facilities at the port for when the trucks arrive, if they're waiting. What I would say is that talking to the main transport providers, electric trucks are not living up to the expectations that they were expecting. They're massively expensive in the first capital expenditure. And then you're right, they're good on short runs, and the majority of the runs out of the port are within 16 to 20 kilometres. But all the transport operators I've talked to are not rushing to electric. There is, some of them are starting to use them on empty container runs because they're less burdensome, a lot lighter, but we're not seeing significant investment. I can't comment on what KiwiRail's doing.
Sure. My question is really not around the electric trucks that are available now. I'm talking about, 3, 4, 5 years out when the production is ramped up. So I understand that.
Councillor Ferry?
Thanks. Appreciate this conversation about making transparent the congestion benefits from the rail aspect, and I think it shows some of the importance of Ports of Auckland being accountable directly to its owner around the owner's climate goals. So thank you for that. My question is actually in a different area because you're in front of us, and I don't mean this as a gotcha because it's only just come to me this morning. So I understand you may have to go away and come back. But I'm interested in the port's position on ships from the Zim shipping line, which supports the Israeli conflict in Gaza. And in particular, I'd like to know what rules we have around dealing with shipping lines that are moving weapons, in particular, potentially white phosphorus, which is against international humanitarian rules.
No, I can answer for you. So first off, Zim ships do not visit the port. They have withdrawn from the market. Ships, their own ships, they are on vessel sharing arrangements with other shipping lines. So Zim still operates within New Zealand, and they are moving their cargo on other shipping lines. So that's the first point of clarity. The second point I'd say is it's neither the responsibility of the port company, and I'm not sure what bounds of legislation for council is, but it's the decision of central government to make any decisions around restricting trade of organisations and other limits. So at this stage, we continue to process cargo as delivered by all lines.
Thank you.
Good question. Councillor Sayers?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Roger. Good to see you both and welcome. Yeah. My question is just around the statement of intent target there, that 16%. So all things being equal, it doesn't seem realistic in terms of that target that's sitting there, especially with the trend that you indicated. So I guess just to be blunt about my question, what type of target's going to be would have been realistic to have set?
I think we set last year 12%, and you asked us to increase that to 16%. And I think 12 is where the market is largely settled. So in my view, it's keeping it at that sort of target. And, you know, when we bring to you the quarterly review, which is coming up for the half year, we will indicate that we will fail to meet the rail target is our current forecast.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Hills.
Kia ora, Chair. Thank you. Thank you for the presentation, Roger. Enlightening, and I think it throws some of the ball back in our court on that, so thank you. I have a completely different question. I know we've discussed it before on ferries. Just want to know and I guess, re-enlighten us on, is the port doing everything on cruises to choose Prince's Wharf last? I know the peak, moving outside the peaks is helping a lot, but are there other things the cruise operation could do to reduce the impact in the ferry basin, or is it about us paying to build other infrastructure, and if there's a cost to that?
So there's a couple of points. First off, we've operated cruise ships on Prince's forever. There was a proposal put forward by the port company prior to my arrival to build a dolphin on the end of Queen's, which a significant number of you and the community rejected. And off the back of that, the larger ships need to stay on Princess because Queen's is not long enough. What we are doing is, so really what I'd say is in relation to big ships being on Princess, it is of the making of the community, because you and the community, not you personally, but many at the governing body refuse to support the building of the Dolphin. So we're left with what we've got. What we are doing is we are engaging with Auckland Transport, and we've agreed to stretch the blackout period in order to try and assist in that aspect of not going alongside. Secondly, we've spoken to you about this before, we are going to seek consent to construct the Bledisloe North Wharf, and what we would then do is, as well as unloading cars and other roll-on, roll-off cargo there, we would look to put the larger cruise ships when they come in, like the Celebrity Edge, which caused the problem when it had the bow thruster turn on, and the Ovations of the Sea, and those really big ones we would stick on there. And if we didn't have a car carrier alongside, then we would put that along there. You need to, as a governing body, decide the future land footprint of the port and give us some certainty, and we've spoken to you about this before. And when you do, we'll be in a position then to review how we build cruise terminal, how we vacate the ferry basin, and a whole lot of other things. But I'll be brutally frank, the uncertainty that continues on land return, on top of Marsden and Cook, which we've agreed to, subject to Bledisloe North, means the board will not invest in additional cruise infrastructure. So we're in your hands. If you'd like us to vacate the ferry basin, we can in time if we know we've got certainty on the rest of the land. So the situation right now is it's in your hands.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
Councillor Fletcher.
Oh, thank you, Roger, for your presentation. I really feel that the brief for Transport and Infrastructure Committee, the most important piece of work is the Integrated Transport Plan, in my opinion. And we can't do that without the port, because the port is such a fundamental part of transport in and around Auckland. There's a tendency when you guys come before us that we delve into the issues that are of the day, but looking at it strategically, how can the relationship between this committee, which is charged with the Integrated Transport Plan, and the Port of Auckland work more closely together to achieve that objective?
I think we're doing okay. I mean, certainly we're engaging directly with officials who support the committee. I think in the end, you as a governing body more broadly have to make some decisions in relation to the port and its future. And once those decisions are made, we can sit down and move forward. What I would continue to encourage you to consider is there is nowhere for the port to go. It won't relocate off its current site for at least, I think, the majority of us will be dead before it moves. And certainly, I think there needs to be that acknowledgement that it's there to stay. So if it's there to stay, how do we then build better infrastructure to allow it to continue to operate, give it certainty and allow it to have that tenure? And I think that's the really key piece. Whilst there isn't that certainty and there's a mindset in some to say we want it gone, then we will always struggle to write the plan that sets the future of the city.
I know that you have an ongoing dialogue with our Executive Officer, Barry Potter. Are there any other circuit breakers we can find to keep that channel of communication going?
Look, no, we're really open to all of you coming down as well, chatting to us one-on-one or as a group. We're happy to come back as often as you want us to come back. We're happy to do some work if you've got other work you want us to consider working with officials on. We're quite relaxed about that because we want an efficient servicing in and out as well for the city and for our neighbours who are the CBD and the people of Parnell. So
the message that you're leaving us today is the importance of certainty in terms of the tenure of the port, and also bringing forward transparency around the current subsidies of the use of rail.
Yep.
Thanks.
That would be right. Thank you.
And certainly that offer from Roger and Andrew to go down to the port is extended on a frequent basis every year. Mayor Brown.
Thanks for that, Roger. I looked at these numbers. That the rail versus truck thing is quite an interesting thing because there are hidden subsidies all over the place. I mean, the trucks run on roads that we own and look after, and they don't particularly pay for that. So that in all countries there are encouragements to move financially from trucks to trains, and at the moment the subsidies here are in favour of trucks. I support what you're doing in terms of changing the costs for off-peak because getting rid of trucks during the day does have a benefit to the community and to other users of the roads. I think we should go a lot further than that. The $7.7 million is actually only $9 per TEU if you take it over the whole 850,000 that you have. And so, and I think we are collecting rates off our people for targeted rates for improving their climate change and all those other apparently good things we do. You know, then $9 off every container in order to get them to go to rail is a benefit to the city and to the other users. So I would encourage you along the lines of using everybody. People move according to money and fear. You know that, and so while it's cheaper for them to go on a truck, they put it on a truck. But if we increase the prices of the trucks, first of all, you increase your profitability, which is a good thing anyhow, because we've been underdoing that for too long. We've been subsidising trucks in Auckland. I don't like paying rates just to have some bugger in a truck. And so I think that the movement to the night ones is good. In my view, there just isn't enough difference between day and night. And I'd like you to recover the $7.7 million from the day users and so that it becomes equalised. And if you'll find it, there will be. And there are other advantages to you because you decongest the port with the ability to cart stuff, empties out to Wirral as well. So I think it's great that you've highlighted where the current thing stands at the moment, but get rid of the subsidy by charging the day users of trucks more. And we'll put up with the political flack of that. I'd rather have the truck users pay more for that than rather ratepayers have to pay for it, because we have some fairly bizarre funding that we collect for climate change, which is not really invested as cleverly as all that. But definitely pushing stuff off a truck onto a train is a climate change win straight away. And so I'm pushing for encouraging your board to be a bit more progressive with it. I support entirely the way you're running and you are moving that way, but bump it a bit more and remove the subsidy for the trucks, because it's not, we're complaining about having to put in a subsidy for trains, we're subsidising trucks, let's face it. And so that's my move on that one, and we'll see how we go. But we'll be watching the responses from the board, and I'm very happy with the way you're moving the port, and I'm very happy with the improvements we're getting. You're just getting the same nudge that AT are going to get in a few minutes. Better, faster, cheaper, move more, and do it, be a bit more aggressive. And that's early warning for Dean, what I'm going to tell him in a few minutes. Okay, thanks very much for that.
Thank you.
Councillor Foley.
Kia ora, thank you, Chair, and thank you for that presentation. That was really, really informative and I think really helpful as we go forward in our decision making as well. I just wanted to ask about the containers going to Wiri and the containers going to the airport precinct. What percentage of containers are going to Wiri and what percentage are going to the airport precinct? And if you're able to tell me, the ones going to Wiri, what percentage are going there by rail versus road? And then with the airport, there's no rail option. So are they 100% of the containers that go into the airport precinct, are they going by road? Just so that I can get those figures.
No, so in answer to your question, I don't have the split, but I'll attempt to get it for you. So I'll take that on notice if I can. What I would say is all of the containers that are going to the airport precinct are delivered by road. They either get transshipped at Wiri, so they're taken by rail out to Wiri, and then from Wiri they move across by road to the distribution centre. Within Wiri, the majority of them are going by road, even with rail availability, because, the majority are either coming or going there by road. So I'll attempt to get the split. It's not something we tend to track, because once the container leaves, its destination is not something that we're aware of. But I'll see what I can do, and I'll drop you back a note.
Okay, thank you.
Nice.
I'm just interested in terms of if the airport precinct is growing as a destination for our containers, and based on what you've said, that is the case, then for us to meet that 16% target, we may need to lobby the government perhaps for a rail option to the airport or something like that. So it would be good to know what the figures are so that we can think about that going forward. Kia ora. Thank you, Chair.
I know that Main Freight are looking to open an Onehunga siding and put on a rail, so we're working through that with them. So most likely what you'd see is rail to Onehunga, road from Onehunga to the airport.
Okay, Member Brown.
It's really just come out of my thoughts in the last couple of minutes, but just after the presentation we had first off, I don't know if this is a question or a comment, but there really needs to be some sort of incentive or incentivising to make this shift. There's more scrutiny around supply lines that businesses use on how they offer a service or a product. And I think of Councillor Fieri around what she commented on, and it really comes back to doing the right thing. Now, if you incentivise doing the right thing, people need to know that you've done that somehow. And I'll just give you a quick example. In tourism, we use a qual mark system. It sort of audits what you do and gives you a mark, gold, silver, bronze. And I'm just wondering if there was some way to incentivise those that are doing the right thing and do have their supply lines scrutinised, if there was a way, and it's probably not incentivising, it's almost pressure around utilising the rail system. Has there been any thought around that?
I think each organisation that uses the port has certain commitments on its supply chain. Certainly larger organisations, like we'll say Kmart, Farmers and all, do that. The reality is New Zealand is a country of small and medium enterprises, and they probably don't have as dedicated a commitment as you would like them to have. That's a situation. So we don't get involved in auditing other people's supply chains and mapping their carbon footprint, etc. We provide a carbon calculator for our customers to allow them to calculate their carbon footprint from their cargo, and we've done that as a free service to encourage them to see alternate options if they are committed to the carbon reduction. But it's not something that we would see as our core business to get involved in.
Yeah, no, and I knew you'd say that, and you're right. I guess it was just pulling something left field to shout from the rooftops, hey, we're doing the right thing. Who implements it, who audits it, sort of by and by. But it is becoming increasingly clear that people are looking at how things are made and delivered to them. And those with a conscience around trying to get rid of some congestion or a better carbon footprint will look at that and say, I would pick that over this one, who seems to be not really making an effort. I just wanted to, maybe that's a comment, that's all.
Yeah, it's a fair point. I mean, you know, I worked at Air New Zealand for 6.5 years, and I was always staggered at how few people offset their flights. A lot of people talk about it, but when they're then asked to put in some money, it doesn't happen.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, good question, but I think there are increasing number of companies who are aware of their public perception, and I think that's something they would think of. Councillor Turner.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you very much on my behalf. I want to encourage you to keep it black and white. It makes it easy for me to understand and communicate to my electorate. Tomorrow we'll be hammering you about not enough profits and returns on our asset, and today we're hammering you with all the little stuff that you can do for us to help us out. Keep it black and white, please. Thank you.
Councillor Darby, you had a short question to come back in?
Yeah, just a short one. In terms of those externality benefits that are in the KiwiRail letter, you contributed to those assessments, I understand, Roger. So are you suggesting that those externality benefits that are gained by rail to South Auckland, and then I'm assuming it takes into account the road transfers to the other destinations? Does it do that, or is it just the main shift from, is it comparing road from the port to the South Auckland destinations, like complete end of journey, with rail to the rail head and the inland port, or does it also take into account the subsequent road trip? I'm trying to get an accurate read on these.
Yep, and that's a very good question, which I can't answer. You'd have to ask Peter Reedy that, or Ernst & Young, who did the report. I'm sorry. We contributed some aspects of it, but I didn't go into the mechanics of, is it from port to warehouse, or is it from port to inland depot? I don't know if the second leg's on it. I'm sorry, I just don't know.
So Barry, this actually looks very alluring, these externality benefits. It looks like the argument is right before us. So my question is, what destination is that being measured against? Can we check as to, are those benefits at 17 to 26 a box, are they from port, say rail, port to ultimate destination via inland port, if by rail, or road from port directly to destinations? Because otherwise we are at risk of capturing this, running with it, and going, yep, up your charges or whatever, but we're actually just shifting a problem to other parts of Auckland.
I think if you have a look at the breakdown, the $45 a TU of congestion, you get a lot of that by back of the clock running on trucks, because you take them out of the peak hour. So that is there, but you could get that by simply trucks working 24/7 rather than like they do now, 18 hours a day largely. The second piece is you would you'd probably get some carbon emission reductions from better running. A truck that spends 90 minutes doing 20 kilometres versus a truck that takes 20 minutes to do it would have lower emissions again. So I think that I agree that, I support Peter's work on this, so I'm not saying it, but I do feel we can achieve a lot of these externalities through driving the trucks into the evening. Now that has some challenges for urban planning, some noise restrictions that you've then got to also ask yourself where you weigh those up between people's condition, living at home and having the truck arrive at Countdown Mount Eden at 3 in the morning because it's doing versus being set limits on when you can deliver to it. So that's one of the challenges I think you've also got to balance up as a governing body.
Barry, can we just get a clarification because it's pretty fundamental?
Yeah,
Thanks.
so Barry's made a note of that and he'll get back to the councillors on that. So that concludes the question. Thank you very much, Roger, for typically an informative and helpful presentation this morning. I don't think there's any necessity to debate anything. Okay, so thank you. If you step back, so the motion is to receive the update from the Port of Auckland, and we do have a couple of councillors that want to speak briefly to it. Councillor Fletcher. No, I was just going to move. Oh, okay. Councillor Fletcher will move it. I'll second it. And Councillor Darby wants to speak to it.
I wasn't going to raise this in the question because the main focus was on rail today, but Councillor Hills raised it, and that is the question of the incredible congestion we have in the cruise basin due to the conflict with cruise. So I have been in discussions, and Roger has been really proactive on looking at extending the cruise exclusion windows. I've been asking for an exclusion of an extra hour in the afternoon and an extra hour in the morning from 5 to 6 through to the current exclusion commencement time. Chair, we've got a big issue in the cruise basin. This is not going to be resolved just by Ports of Auckland and us asking them to do work. It's not even going to be answered and resolved by putting Ports of Auckland together with Auckland Transport and the Harbour Master, and they're already working together and working with the cruise industry. I think there's a much bigger discussion that we have not had, and I would like to see us have, and I'm not sure, Barry, where this discussion really kicks off, is what is cruise for Auckland? Do we choose cruise, or do we just take what turns up and clip the ticket, pump fuel into them, provision them a little bit, and a whole bunch of people scatter across Auckland? There is resentment to cruise tourism growing all around the world. I just don't want to see us in a situation where we're a Barcelona or many other cities that resent cruise because we never shaped cruise. We never thought about cruise, and the only cruise assessment reports that I've ever read are written by the Cruise Industry Association, which are conflicted. So in my view, there's an important body of work that we need to get underway. We need to start thinking about what cruise brings to this city, what it contributes, how we can shape that, how we choose cruise. And not just for the city, but working with other cities so that Aotearoa New Zealand chooses cruise. And we shape it for us. And the cruise lines, they get their benefit too, they get their financial returns. But cruise is changing dramatically, and we are seeing at one end of the scale bespoke smaller vessels, Viking Line and others, but we're also getting the cattle class at sea mega ships where many of those people will not disembark because everything, the joy is on board and the port is almost secondary. We've got some massive problems right now, just the one in the cruise basin with the conflict. In December, early January, we had over 100 ferry services cancelled or delayed significantly. We had tens of thousands of Aucklanders who were not getting to work, employment, places they want to get to, all the others, because of the conflict with cruise in the downtown ferry basin. So this is a multifaceted piece of work, I believe. At the first instance, we need to start to choose cruise for Auckland, not just allow and deal with what turns up. There's a huge opportunity here. Let's create the opportunity rather than inherit what we're getting at the moment. There's a problem.
Right, the motion's been moved and seconded. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. The next item up is the Auckland Transport update. And